Okay, welcome back everybody to another episode of Let's Get Banned. First off, I would just like to thank everyone for the incredible feedback that we've been receiving for the last 3 or 4 public episodes, and of course the members episodes, the Kraken. I really do appreciate the welcome, the sort of the welcome back from all of you. I promise to work harder than ever, and I hope some of you are seeing that already. With that being said, let's jump right into it. So today's Let's Get Banned is called Why Mass Psychosis and Demonic Possessions Aren't So Clear-Cut as Some May Want to Believe, and my thoughts on the internet solar storm. Now, for those who don't know, there's allegedly a solar storm that may in fact wipe out the entire planet's, I guess you could say, underground network with regards to the cables that go underwater that connect different countries, with regards to, broadband, with regards to many different things that are able to create the internet and allow for the internet to do the things that it does now, right? Now, again, here's the thing that I find interesting, the most interesting, to be honest with all of you, and I cannot take full credit for all of this, but anyways, let's take a look at this right here. Schedule of reinforcement psychology, and you're going to see what this has to do with the internet apocalypse, the solar storm, the alleged solar flare. We'll get to that article in a second. In addition to demonic possessions, UFO sightings, and mass psychosis, because I do believe, there is one massive reoccurrence that seems to be happening. Now, there's a few different angles that we could take here, but first off, let's address this in the first angle before we get to another couple potential options. So first off, it's been proposed by many, not me whatsoever, people long before me, that the Earth is a living, breathing creature of sorts, or some type of manifestation of a living entity or entropy that we cannot yet understand. I'm not speaking of the trees. I'm not speaking just of the soil, of the life that is grown on this planet. I'm speaking of as well the electromagnetic frequencies that the heartbeat or rhythm of the Earth emits. Now, what's interesting, folks, is that, again, if we look at the data points consistent with many eyewitness accounts relative to that of those that have filed reports with regards to demonic possessions, experiences of mass psychosis and things like that, you're going to find that on events, for example, where the Earth's heartbeat is emitting a certain frequency, people end up experiencing things relative to that of where they are at a time and place within this, simulation, if you want to call it, that is far more anomalistic compared to if the Earth's frequency or heartbeat was a little bit less. Now, let me give you folks a little bit of an example, because I'm not just referring to the Earth's heartbeat. I'm going to be very truthful and open with all of you. One of the ways that I actually, one of the things I noticed when going through my bout of depression, if you want to call it, is that actually, thankfully enough, my girlfriend pointed this out to me. She goes, "Hey, did you notice you happen to have a breakdown or an episode every single time there's a full moon?" And I didn't know this. I really didn't notice. She was looking at her calendar. We did some checking, and I was like, holy cow. This may in fact be something that is larger than what we had originally thought in terms of the intentionality relative to the simulation we live in. So let's take a look, for example, at this right here. Schedule of reinforcement psychology. So, and I quote, In operant conditioning, a schedule of reinforcement is any rule determining which response should be allowed by reinforcement under conditions where not every response is necessarily reinforced, end quote. So basically, to translate that into plain English, it's a very simple method. It's nothing new, it's nothing niche, it's nothing secretive. Very simple in the sense that, for example, say you have a dog, okay? You throw the bone to your dog and you tell your dog to go run and get it and then bring it back to you. Dog does what you say, you give your dog a treat. That's positive reinforcement. And again, this all falls in line with the schedule of reinforcement psychology. What's interesting is that UFO sightings, okay, and I'm not trying to just make connections where there aren't any, but UFO sightings all around the world, according to Jacques Vallée and his colleagues, having to do with, the recent book that he released about 6 or 7 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, point out that. And again, funny that Mr. Vallée and his colleagues have yet to be debunked, because they're sort of towing the line of what the institutional standards are in a public sense, but they know what's really going on. But anyway, sorry for the rant. UFOs would show up in a certain region in Brazil for 2 to 3 months at a time. There would be heavy activity. Lots of people would document it. Lots of people would see it, and nowadays, of course, lots of people would record it with their phones and what have you. And then, for about 2-3 months, it would disappear. But then these craft would appear on another part of the planet. Doesn't mean that they're the same craft. But at the same time that these craft would appear, now this is not from Mr. Vallée's book. I want to make that very clear. I do not intend to defame the scientist, the physicist. I do have a lot of respect for the gentleman. With that being said, though, At the same time, I personally matched some of the dates that he wrote in his recent book. And you could see, or sorry, the dates that he specified, excuse me, you could see that there's actually a matching and lining up with certain demonic possessions. Now, again, the possessions have nothing to do with the UFO sightings, but they seem to occur at the same time. So could it be that there has to be some type of correspondence or rhythmic apparatus or pattern that these entities are able to enter our dimension in a much more easier way when certain things are aligned? Again, and if we take a look, for example, at, Jacques Vallée's interview with Joe Rogan, what does he say on there? At one point, him and his colleagues had tried to make connections and proposals that, again, putting the paranormal aspect aside, that UFOs would appear when it seemed like certain planets within Earth's orbit were closer to Earth. There could have been, they tried to analyze if there could have been some form of interdimensionality there, or some type of, esoteric technology or natural esotericism within this simulation or this particular dimension that allows them to come and go in a much easier sense. So that's interesting to begin with. Now, the other thing I want to mention too, folks, is that when we talk about demonic possessions, one of the things that bothers me about when people say, being possessed, is that it's like using the word depression. It's a very overused, generalized word. And so when people are possessed, there are legitimate possessions. There are people that, sleepwalk, that are controlled by entities allegedly. And then there are people that are undergoing, a form of mass psychosis or a smaller, more minute form of psychosis. Whether that is coming from their own self-conscious, from themselves, or from another entity is hard to say. And this is why there's a big confusion, if you ask me, and conflation rather, with regards to how these species operate, in the sense that they are resurrecting themselves energetically. So what I mean by that is this: if we apply the schedule of reinforcement psychology to these UFOs appearing, disappearing, demonic possessions rising up for many weeks at a time and then rising down again, there clearly is an energetic pattern or system that's occurring here. Now, here's the thing though: schedule of reinforcement, the theory, if we jump back here from, simply psychology, and even if you're a basic psychologist, you know this, but scheduled reinforcement doesn't just give the treat to the dog when the dog does what you asked it to do. Sometimes it doesn't give the treat to the dog, even though the dog did exactly what you asked them to do. It is testing to see how the belief system may be inquired, or I guess you could say implemented, into the evolutionary scale of that from a mental perspective, meaning that these UFOs, when they show up for 2 or 3 months at a time, then they disappear. People that return for those 2-3 months to see if they're there or not are the people that have a much more structured belief system, not necessarily a blind obedience or blind belief system. Let's make that very clear. I'm not saying blind obedience or blind belief, but logical, intelligent belief. Okay, whereas the people that saw the UFOs for the 2-3 months and then came back and tried, spent 2-3 weeks looking for them again in that same particular geographical area, said, screw it, they're not coming back. But the people that persevered is what I believe the certain species are looking for. Now, when it comes to the spiritual and paranormal side, that's a little bit of a different story. It seems like the energies and frequencies that are emitting towards that of a lower vibrational state are, again, what these paranormal entities feed off of. Now, of course, I don't need to tell you folks that, because I'm not trying to make it seem like I know something about the paranormal that you folks don't. I'm sure there are many of you that know more than me, actually. However, what I find interesting is that same 2 to 3 month example about how people see UFOs and then some come back for the next 2-3 months and they wait it out and the 2-3 months, and then the ones that only wait 2-3 weeks and say, screw it, they walk away. The belief system seems to enforce within the atomic molecular structure of the human body a form of energetic activation. Okay, and I do not claim to know the science behind it, but it seems as though the energetic activation is perpendicular and parallel with what we see here from space.com. An internet apocalypse could ride to Earth with the next solar storm, new research warns. The underwater cables that connect nations could go offline for months, the study warns. Now, on a surface level, if you folks want to know my opinion, I think there's larger things to worry about, mainly because I really do believe that humans and extraterrestrials have this under control. So this is just a form of warning, if you will. However, I do believe it plays into the climate change narrative, agenda, things like this. However, take a look at this right here. And I quote, "The sun is always showering Earth with a mist of magnetized particles known as solar wind. For the most part, our planet's magnetic shield blocks this electric wind from doing any real damage to Earth or its inhabitants, instead sending these particles skittering towards the poles and leaving behind a pleasant aurora in their wake," end quote. interesting that the sun has been described in ancient drawings, as I'm about to pull up over here, for example, right? Clearly, I mean, come on, at this point, guys, if these institutions are choosing to ignore history, people are waking up at this point. I mean, look at these drawings. I don't understand what you think this could be. Like, you know, anyways. If we take a look at some of the ancient drawings, such as these ones, for example, that show, you know, extra UFOs and disc-shaped craft going in and out of the sun, it's possible that this particular solar flare may enact a form of portal or interdimensional, I don't want to say transportation, but I have no other word to use per se. Not only from an extraterrestrial sense, but from a paranormal sense. Now, here's what's interesting as well, too. Paranormal entities have been known, not all of them, but the more stronger, energetically stronger ones, which don't always mean positive ones, by the way. There are very negative ones, too, have been known to communicate via things like text message, via things like Facebook Messenger. I know that sounds crazy, but there's so many cases that, again, are all the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cases being made up? We have to consider the possibility that there may in fact be a legitimate substantive argument to this, right? So therefore, debate needs to be had. With that being said, these UFOs are going in and out of the portals. These paranormal beings are now being activated because of these solar flares. Therefore, it would allow for these beings to harness the internet in a much more transparent and resilient way, which is interesting because do you notice, for those that go on the dark web, do you notice that there seems to be a sudden I guess you could say a file dump or dump of secret classified stuff, alleged. Some could be misinformation, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive to that, but classified, intelligence, footage, UFO, all that type of stuff. A bunch of stuff hits the dark web every time there's a solar flare spark up. Again, the only evidence I have to support this is when you match up the dates. It's as simple as that. I don't have the technology, I don't have the money, I don't have the funding to be able to put together a machine or a device that could track this in a much more appropriate way, even though I wish I did. Again, we're going to find that this could be the case. And the reason why also I want to mention very quickly here that I talk about the potential for this being a form of drop feeding is because we're going to find, if we take a look at this article here, again, we're going to find the probability of this happening is extremely, extremely rare, right? So again, it's hard to say whether or not this will legitimately happen. I don't think it will. I also think there's a form of artificial control that could curate this. But again, take a look, and I quote, the economic impact of an internet disruption for a day in the U.S. is estimated to be over $7 billion. What if the network remains non-functional for days or even months, end quote. The only theory I have of a solar flare occurring in which would deactivate the digital activities and power and electronics of people for many, many weeks and months at a time is to allow for an energetic operation to take place in this physical dimension as well as interdimensionally, okay? Now, if we take a look at some of these drawings, I mean, look at this. Look at the drawings of these people offering, these extraterrestrials, gifts and things like that, being praised as gods, if you want to call it. But that's not the point here. The point here is this. Take a look at this right here. This may or may not be indicative of a hybrid extraterrestrial babies or something like this of the sort. And the reason I say this is because if we jump over here to the sun.co.uk, Google Earth user finds giant UFO surrounded by tanks and mystery crashed plane in Death Valley. Now, I would like to thank my friend, if I'm not mistaken, Wyatt, for actually notifying me of this. Thank you so much, brother. And if not, then you know who you are. You sent me this email with these coordinates just a couple days ago. But take a look at this right here. Images of the mysterious site in Lone Pine Unified School District in California appear to show an abandoned boat alongside a 340-foot teardrop-shaped crater. Baffled by their discovery, Twitter user CryptoSpawn claimed it could be a landing indentation from a large craft. Okay, now, here's what's interesting too there, folks. I'm not going to elaborate on the speculations and things like that. However, look at this. There are several tanks that appear to be guarding the area as well, the Twitter user wrote. What's interesting is that, again, people have said, this could be debunked and things like that. Things happen all the time within this Death Valley, if you want to call it. With that being said, not only is Death Valley known for certain UFO sightings, but also it's known for, again, the crossover of paranormal entities and gray aliens, specifically small grays. I know there are different kinds, so again, I don't want to put them all in one big pot. Small grays being seen, again, within Death Valley on people who live within the vicinity or the general area. So could it be possible that this is not only an ionized air pocket for underground bases, but this is also possible to be a portal for interdimensional beings, whether these extraterrestrials that ionize the air pockets want this to occur or not, okay? With that being said, let's take a look at this right here. Demonic possessions, this is according to voyageips.com, voyageintoParanormalSociety.com, and I quote, demonic possession over the last few years, there has been a dramatic increase in claims of demonic possession. While some have a valid issue that may not be explainable by medical science. Okay, there is a grave reaction to label all imbalances of the psyche or emotions as a spiritual issue, such as demonical possession. Okay, and end quote. They continue to go on and say this is the thin line between psychosis and, again, demonic possession. And to be honest with you folks, I couldn't agree more. Now, I did want to pull up a couple of pictures here, right? This is what, some people have, allegedly look like when they are possessed and things like that. Now, it's also possible that if we totally reorient our perception of what we were to consider, this is a very famous picture as well too, I wanted to bring this up, of what we consider to be demonic. Let's take aside the demonic perception, putting aside the Bible and things like that, and the Quran, any type of human religion, okay, respectfully. Let's put that aside and let's look at the much larger picture here, okay? Could it be possible that these different beings that are occurring, possessing people, and then leaving are not necessarily always bad? Don't get me wrong. It's pretty clear that there's a lot of entities that are negative. I'm not arguing that. But they appear, they infiltrate certain people's bodies, or they give people certain messages and then disappear relative, okay, to the schedule of reinforcement psychology. And I'm going to take it one step further for you folks, okay? You remember in the previous, if I'm not mistaken, public episode, or this was a Let's Get Banned early release. It's not out publicly yet, forgive me. But I think I've spoken about it before, how using very advanced holograms and lasers within human scientific laboratories, it's possible that you can actually have someone being in two different places at once. Because again, if you think about it in a simple concept, take a laser. What happens when you bend a laser, right? Instead of a laser beam going straight, or you put a piece of glass or a reflective piece in between it or in front of it, it's now going straight, and then it's also going another direction as well. Maybe that wasn't the best explanation, but what I'm trying to say here is that it's possible that certain entities that are negatively oriented at an atomic and energetic level, not just physical ones relative to this dimension, could be grounded to the planet while also being in another dimension, which could explain why when some people say they're visited by relatives from their past and things like that, and their relatives say, I'm in heaven, but at the same time I'm also lost. And I think a lot of you are going to know what I'm talking about here. Again, or, relatives saying, I see the light, but I can't get to it. These are what most people or paranormal hunters would call, I guess, lost souls, if you want to call it, for a loose definition. I don't mean to act like I'm an expert by any stretch, but again. So that then takes us to our next proposal, which is right here, allthat'sinteresting.com, the legend of the chronovisor, a time machine hidden in the Vatican. From the 1960s until the 1990s, Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed that he helped create a time machine called the chronovisor, which he used to observe the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Now, anyways, before I go on, this has been substantiated by people like Bob Lazar, by a couple of other people who have come out on the internet between 2005, 2007 with credentials, not with their identity, but with credentials blocking out their identity. So again, we could be skeptical of that, but they're all saying that this is in fact a legitimate device, and this device has also been weaponized, and it was certain elements and energetic elements were used in Desert Storm to sort of totally get rid of any evidence, even if aliens were to come and use technology relative to that of the chronovisor. Now, there's also funding, public funding, that addresses this too. The Vatican poured tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into this project, many millions. Then all of a sudden it just disappeared. So again, it's not for me to say whether this happened or not, but it's, again, I want to do my best to report this in the most unbiased way possible. Anyways, take a look at this right here. From the, let me jump over here. The chronovisor is said to be a device that gives the user the ability to see through time. Though the existence of the chronovisor has never been proven, a 2002 book by Vatican priest Father Francois Brun says otherwise. According to Brun, the chronovisor was developed by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk. Ernetti allegedly kept the device secret until the early 60s when he confided in Brune and told him that 12 scientists, including famed physicist Enrico Fermi and former Nazi scientist Werner von Braun, helped him to build it. Again, before I go on, end quote, helped him to build it. 12 scientists. Majestic 12? It's possible. Again, I could be wrong, but it's possible. So Look at this. This also furthers what I was saying about giving the example of lasers and light and how things could bend and how this could be representative of that, of different beings. Again, if you do not have control of the structural atoms within your own body and your own DNA, if you want to call it, or you don't know that you do, after you've passed on physically, you are stuck, which could explain why you'd be in two places at once. Therefore, the composition and energetic consciousness of your particular individual self would be separated. And take a look, and I quote, "Made of cathode rays, antennae, and metals that receive sound and light signals on all wavelengths, the chronovisor purportedly allowed the team of scientists to document events of the past, including the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The machine, therefore, could validate the teachings of the Bible simply by providing a first-hand look into the past." Anyways, take a look at this. The chronovisor was allegedly built by a Nobel Prize winner and a NASA engineer. Enrico Fermi, who allegedly helped build the chronovisor, won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1938. Again, the Fermi paradox, right? That whole concept there. What we're also going to find too is there's consistency with the chronovisor relative to that of the Fibonacci sequence, which is directly indicative of the implementation of energy and constant reoccurrence of hexagonal patterns within nature, circular patterns, cube-like patterns, square-like patterns. Not only that, but it's supported by the science that is now being done at Battelle.org. And again, Battelle is the corporation that Jacques Vallée said, publicly on Joe Rogan many years ago, some shot off pieces of metal from certain UFO craft that were taken, that were ordered by the U.S. The U.S. government, to shoot down certain pieces, were then brought to Battelle Corporation to be analyzed. Now, Jacques Vallée would not continue. He kind of dodged around the question as to what was found and discovered within the metal. But what's interesting too is that he said this, which will bring everything full circle. By the way, folks. Mr. Vallée said that the metal itself could be found on Mars, could be found on Earth. It's not anything particularly unique. However, the atomic structure of the metal would cost billions, if not trillions of dollars to reconstruct at even the smallest amount relative to human measurement. So that tells us the atoms of the UFO craft were reconstructed at such an advanced level that, again, it explains why certain extraterrestrials also claim to be made up of the same thing that their craft are. Because, again, it could be argued that it's one and the same. Notice how when you see UFO craft flying in the sky, particularly disc-shaped one that are moving more rapidly, which they generally tend to be, they move much like someone is thinking in real time. Very similar to telepathic control, is it not? Again, the same topics Lou Elizondo refuses to speak on. Because, again, he knows people look up to him. And I bring all of this up, folks, because that corresponds perfectly, okay, in line with, again, schedule of reinforcement psychology, okay? See who is going to persist. These tests are done in order to see how much belief people have, or how much more belief people have within modern society. In addition to that, the paranormal side of things is used more so for gang stalking. I'm not saying possessions are done intentionally, but I would dare to argue that possessions could be curated. There could be ways to control certain interdimensional beings for possessions to happen, which is why I say in the title, mass psychosis and demonic possessions are not as clear-cut as they seem. So, with that being said, folks, let me know what you think, and we'll catch all of you very soon. Cheers.